The Astral Parasites. Introduction. They live in the spaces between your thoughts, in the stillness after an argument, in the exhaustion that has no physical cause. They are not ghosts nor demons, at least not in the way religion imagined them. They are forms of energy, invisible, intelligent, ancient. They feed not on flesh, but on emotion, on fear, on rage, on despair. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky warned that humanity swims in an ocean of unseen life, a psychic atmosphere as real as air, dense with thought forms, emotions, and fragments of consciousness. We are not merely surrounded by them, we create them. Every unhealed wound, every repetitive thought, every surge of passion gives birth to something in that invisible world, something that continues to live long after the feeling has passed. You can sense their presence when you walk into a room that feels heavy for no reason, when you leave a conversation more tired than before, when nightmares circle you even in daylight. They whisper, they provoke, they feed, not out of evil, but out of instinct. For in the invisible ecology of the astral world, everything consumes and is consumed. And yet the danger is not in their existence. It is in our ignorance of it. This is the revelation Blavatsky tried to hand humanity more than a century ago, that the war between light and dark is not external, but vibrational, that our thoughts are living things, that energy, once created, returns to claim its maker. So before we begin, remember this truth. You are not powerless in this unseen world, for the same mind that gives birth to shadows can also summon light, and when the light remembers itself, nothing in the darkness can feed upon it. Chapter 1. The Invisible World Between Worlds. There are worlds within this world, layers of reality that shimmer just beyond the edge of human sight. They have no borders, no cities, no stars, and yet they are densely populated. Every thought that ever burned with emotion, every fear that trembled through a heart, every dream that dissolved upon waking, all of them still exist somewhere. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky called that realm the astral plane, a vast ocean of luminous substance alive with vibrations. It is the halfway world between spirit and matter, between form and formlessness. To her, the physical world was merely the shadow of that greater dimension. The universe, she wrote, is not dead matter but living energy, one boundless field of consciousness. Blavatsky's words were not metaphor. She meant that the very air surrounding us is woven from invisible threads of force, each responding to the pulse of human thought. Every joy, every terror, every craving emits a frequency, and those frequencies ripple through the astral atmosphere like waves across a hidden sea. There, emotion becomes substance, desire becomes density, and from those densities things begin to live. The ancients knew it long before science tried to measure energy. The Egyptians called this subtle body the Ka, the twin of the flesh. The Hindus named it prana, the breath of life. The Greeks spoke of pneuma, the invisible wind that moves the soul. In every culture, a fragment of the same truth endured. Human beings are not solid. We are radiations of light clothed in matter, and those radiations do not end where the skin ends. Blavatsky, through her vast theosophical work in the 19th century, gathered these fragments into one grand warning, that unseen forces inhabit this intermediate world. She called some of them elementaries, remnants of human passion, wandering shadows of lives once lived. Others, she said, were natural elementals, forces of the astral world that mimic intelligence but lack moral compass. They feed, she wrote, upon the vital magnetism of humanity, the subtle electricity that animates the soul. When the human being is serene, the aura glows with harmony, a perfect oval of living light, what the mystics saw as the halo. But when anger flares or grief overwhelms, or fear is left to ferment, that light becomes porous. Tiny fractures appear in the luminous sheath. Through those openings, unseen energies enter. You feel it as exhaustion, confusion, or sudden anxiety with no clear cause. To Blavatsky, these were not mere moods. They were the traces of contact, the fingerprints of an invisible exchange. In her time, the public dismissed such ideas as mysticism. Yet in the occult schools of Tibet, Egypt, and Greece, this knowledge was guarded as sacred science. The Tibetan Lama spoke of hungry ghosts, entities born from insatiable desire. The early Christian desert fathers spoke of logismoi, whispering thoughts that were not their own. And in each tradition, the advice was the same: discipline the mind, purify the heart, guard the gate of thought. Because thought, Blavatsky said, is the architect of the astral world. Every human mind is a workshop where invisible forms are forged. We are, each of us, constant creators, releasing armies of luminous or shadowed beings into the unseen. Some nourish us, others drain us. Some serve our evolution, others cling to our decay. The astral plane, then, is not distant. It is here interlayered through this very room, intertwined with every human field of emotion. When you walk into a place heavy with sorrow, you feel it before a word is spoken. When you meet a person whose presence brightens the air, you sense their coherence. That is the language of the astral, the unspoken dialogue of energy. Blavatsky warned that the coming centuries would drown humanity in psychic noise. She foresaw the rise of machines that amplify emotion, the saturation of minds by images of fear and desire. She predicted that the astral atmosphere of the planet would grow congested, crowded with thought forms created by billions of restless hearts. And she insisted that only inner mastery, not technology, not ritual, could restore balance. The astral parasites, she said, are not demons in the religious sense. They are the natural consequence of creative power used unconsciously. They are the shadow of our ungoverned emotion. They cling to what they recognize, anger to anger, fear to fear, lust to lust, for resonance is their law of survival. And they fade only when that resonance ceases. To understand this is to reclaim your power. You are not a victim of invisible forces. You are their source, and therefore their master. Every time you choose peace over reaction, forgiveness over resentment, love over judgment, you alter the chemistry of the unseen. You withdraw the nourishment that darkness requires. And in that moment, the parasites starve. So as this journey begins, remember, you are not alone in this universe of energy. You walk through oceans of invisible life. Some of it serves you, some of it seeks you, all of it responds to you. Awareness is your first shield, because once you begin to see what moves behind the veil, you can never again pretend that the veil is empty. Chapter 2. The Feeding Ground of Emotion. There is a hidden economy in the unseen, an exchange that few recognize yet all participate in. It is not measured in money or power, but in energy. Every heartbeat, every emotion, every surge of thought radiates a subtle current that flows outward into the invisible world. And wherever there is flow, there are those who feed. Blavatsky warned that humanity is not only surrounded by invisible forces, but constantly interpenetrated by them. She compared the astral plane to a vast psychic ocean, and each human being to a luminous sphere moving through it. Every emotion we feel, every burst of anger, every tremor of joy, disturbs that ocean, sending ripples outward that attract similar waves. Like resonates with like. It is the oldest law of vibration. She wrote, "Each thought, each emotion, creates a vibration in the astral light, and there it remains, attracting others of its kind until it becomes a force in itself." What she described more than a century ago, modern science now begins to glimpse through the study of electromagnetic fields, emotional contagion, and mirror neurons. Yet to Blavatsky, this was not theory but direct occult fact. Emotion is substance, and substance, once charged with life, demands nourishment. When the human aura, that subtle atmosphere surrounding the body, is radiant, balanced, and coherent, it acts as a natural shield. Emotions flow through it, purified and dispersed. But when one's inner world becomes stormy, when anger, fear, jealousy, or grief dominate, cracks appear in that luminous field. Through those cracks, the energy that sustains us leaks out like steam escaping a broken vessel. Most people know this sensation intimately without ever naming it. It's that exhaustion that follows a confrontation, even if you said nothing. The heaviness that lingers after spending time with someone perpetually negative. The mental fog that settles after scrolling endlessly through conflict, gossip, or fear. You are not just tired. You are drained, because you have participated, often unconsciously, in an energetic exchange. In the metaphysical view, every emotion has a frequency. High emotions, love, gratitude, serenity, oscillate quickly and freely. They flow outward like music, harmonizing with the universal field. Low emotions, rage, resentment, shame, move slowly and stickily. They cling, they absorb, they entangle. Wherever those dense emotions gather, they form clusters of astral matter that feed upon further discord. Blavatsky described these forms as psychic larvae, the astral remains of human passions. They are not moral beings, but energetic organisms born from vibration. They feed where resonance allows. Just as a mosquito is drawn to blood, an astral parasite is drawn to emotional intensity. When a person lives in chronic anger or fear, they become a banquet. The ancients understood this dynamic instinctively. That is why temples were built as centers of stillness, why fasting and silence were prescribed before sacred work. The priest, the yogi, the initiate, all sought to calm the inner tempest, not merely for discipline's sake, but for protection. To still the emotions was to seal the aura, to make the self invisible to the lower forms of life in the astral sea. In her travels through India and Tibet, Blavatsky encountered adepts who spoke openly of these entities. They called them bhutas, shadows of desire. They were said to drift in the lower atmosphere, magnetically bound to the passions that birthed them. They live off the vitality of the living until they disintegrate. Unless, she warned, they find continual nourishment through human hosts who echo their vibration. If this seems distant or fantastical, look at the world today. Our collective emotions are constantly being harvested, not by mystical beings alone, but by systems designed to feed on attention, outrage, and fear. Blavatsky might have recognized our modern media landscape as a physical manifestation of the astral feeding mechanism she described. Invisible currents amplified into mass emotion, draining energy from millions at once. The astral parasites of her time wore no digital face, yet their appetite was the same: to consume human vitality through the vibration of emotion. Consider what happens during collective panic. An event occurs, real or imagined, and within minutes the atmosphere thickens. Social media explodes with fear, anger, and judgment. You can almost feel the temperature of human consciousness rising, and somewhere in that unseen dimension, vast clouds of psychic substance begin to throb, expanding, feeding, multiplying. The more we react, the more they feast. Every fearful thought is a morsel, every accusation, a spark that keeps them alive. Blavatsky's insight was radical. She insisted that evil, in most cases, is not intentional but vibrational. There are no devils lurking in caverns of fire, only forms of energy sustained by our unconscious participation. She saw humanity as both victim and creator, prey and provider. And her remedy was not exorcism but self-mastery. For as soon as one withdraws emotional fuel, the parasite starves. You can test this law in your own life. The next time someone provokes you, perhaps with criticism or manipulation, watch what rises within. Feel the surge of heat, the tightening of the chest, the rush of defensive thought. That is the astral field stirring. If you answer it with equal energy, you open the gate wider. But if you pause, breathe, and anchor in calm, something miraculous happens. The wave collapses, the feeding stops. You have refused the invitation. This is why ancient mystics placed such emphasis on emotional purity. They understood that love is not sentiment, but vibration, a frequency that seals the aura like gold. Hatred, by contrast, unravels it. Fear perforates it. Desire distorts it. Each negative state makes us more permeable to the hungry forces that dwell in the twilight of the astral world. In The Key to Theosophy, Blavatsky wrote, "When the lower passions are stilled, The astral light reflects the divine. That is the goal of the initiate, not to escape the world, but to refine the field through which consciousness expresses itself. For every human being is both transmitter and receiver, radiating frequencies that either pollute or sanctify the invisible realms. The more we indulge in emotional turbulence, the more we thicken the astral atmosphere with psychic residue. It is not only personal, it is planetary. Our collective moods shape the energetic climate of Earth as tangibly as weather patterns shape its sky. And in that climate, countless invisible lives are born, some radiant, others parasitic. Imagine, then, the responsibility we hold. Every argument left unresolved, every bitterness cherished, every fear rehearsed is not simply in your head, it is in the field. It contributes to the invisible ecology in which all souls live and breathe. What Blavatsky called the astral parasites are, in truth, the reflection of humanity's unmastered emotion. They are the smoke of our internal fires, and if we wish to clear the atmosphere, we must first tend the flame within. So the question becomes personal. How much energy have you given away today? How many invisible mouths have you fed through anger, anxiety, or complaint? And how many luminous beings could you have nourished instead if you had chosen gratitude, silence, or love? For in this hidden economy, nothing is lost. Every vibration you send forth finds its home. And the world you inhabit, seen and unseen, is the mirror of what you feed. Chapter 3. How Thought Creates Entities. Helena Blavatsky once wrote that thought is the most potent of all creative energies. To her, this was not an allegory. It was a literal truth, one that explains the architecture of invisible life that swarms around us. She claimed that every thought you think, every image, every emotion charged with desire or fear takes form in the astral light. It condenses like vapor upon glass, taking on shape, color, and motion. And once it is born, it lives. We think in words, but the universe responds to vibration. When thought is wrapped in emotion, it becomes radiant energy, radiating outward into the subtle medium that Blavatsky called the plastic substance of the unseen world. There it molds itself according to its own tone. A thought of compassion produces a fine, luminous form that harmonizes with higher vibrations. A thought of malice generates a dense, shadowed shape that sinks into the lower strata of the astral field. Every moment, billions of such forms are created by humanity, a ceaseless storm of psychic architecture spinning in the invisible atmosphere of Earth. And while most of these thought forms are weak and fleeting, fading as quickly as the emotion that birthed them, some endure. Repetition gives them strength, emotion gives them density, attention gives them direction. What begins as a spark of mental energy becomes, over time, a living organism of thought. This is the true meaning of thought form, not an idea stored in memory, but an energetic being existing independently in the astral substance, held together by the vibrational signature of its creator. It is alive only as long as it is fed, through attention, emotion, or repetition. Theosophical writings after Blavatsky would later expand on this doctrine. Annie Besant and C.W. Leadbeater, her successors, even described these forms in astonishing detail. A thought of love appears as a soft rose-violet glow. Anger as jagged red streaks shot through with black. Selfishness as heavy brown-grey clouds. Each, they said, moves through the astral world seeking resonance, drawn magnetically toward minds vibrating on the same frequency. In this way, thought becomes contagion. The angry thought of one man can inflame another a continent away if their emotional tones match. The despair of thousands can saturate a nation's psychic atmosphere, and the collective hatred of generations can crystallize into immense, semi-conscious entities that haunt entire civilizations, the egregores of modern occultism. Blavatsky hinted at this in Isis Unveiled. Nations, like individuals, have their own soul, their own aura, and it is the emanation of the collective thought of their people. She foresaw that unbridled emotion, amplified by technology, would one day fill the lower astral with forms so dense they could influence the physical world itself. Today we see that prophecy fulfilled in subtle ways: mass hysteria, ideological possession, collective fear. We call them social contagions. She would have called them elementaries of thought, children of the human mind. To understand how this works, imagine a sculptor carving in invisible clay. Each thought is a stroke of the chisel. Each emotion adds color, weight, and scent. Once complete, the sculpture leaves the studio, but the sculptor remains energetically tied to it by the thread of intention. As long as he remembers it, speaks of it, or feels toward it, that form draws vitality from him. When he forgets, it begins to fade, unless others, drawn to its shape, begin to feed it in turn. This is why recurring thoughts of anger, guilt, jealousy, or fear feel almost autonomous. They are autonomous. They are the energetic offspring of your own consciousness, circling back to you like birds returning to their nest. Each time you indulge them, you strengthen them. Each time you resist with awareness, you dissolve them. Blavatsky taught that this mechanism is both our downfall and our salvation. For the same creative force that builds the parasite can build the guardian. A single, sustained thought of love can give birth to a luminous being that blesses all who come near it. In ancient mysticism, such beings were called devas, angels, tutelary spirits. They are the radiant counterparts to the psychic larvae of the lower astral, both children of thought, but born of different parents, one of devotion, the other of desire. She wrote, "Every thought we think is a being in the unseen world. If good, it blesses its creator. If evil, it curses him. Thus, heaven and hell are not places, but ecosystems of energy, populated by the forms that consciousness has generated throughout its evolution. The astral parasites, then, are not foreign invaders. They are our own children, starved, deformed, and hungry. Imagine what this means on a collective scale. Each human life contributes its psychic weather to the planet. Blavatsky described the Earth itself as a living organism with an astral body, sensitive to the vibrations of every soul upon it. When millions of people radiate fear, the planetary aura dims. When millions radiate compassion, the entire field brightens. In this sense, the battle between light and darkness is not cosmic theater, but human psychology made universal. If thought creates beings, then every mind is a womb, and every emotion a seed. What do you give birth to each day? How many invisible entities circle your life, shaped by your repeated thoughts and emotional habits? Every resentment you rehearse becomes a small, tenacious form, whispering its script back to you. Every guilt you feed becomes a shadow companion that drains you quietly. But every kind intention, every moment of beauty, every act of silent gratitude gives rise to a being of light, subtle, invisible, yet profoundly real. This law of creation explains why spiritual traditions emphasize watchfulness. Guard the heart with all diligence, says the Book of Proverbs, for out of it flow the issues of life. Blavatsky would have said, guard your thought, for out of it flows the very substance of your destiny. She insisted that the magician's first task was not ritual, but purification of motive, because impure thought, projected with will, births monsters. Modern science might frame this differently, as neural patterning, subconscious conditioning, or psychosomatic feedback. But the essence is identical. Thought repeated becomes structure. Structure directs behavior. Behavior generates experience. Experience confirms belief. And belief feeds thought once again. The cycle is energetic, mechanical, and spiritual all at once. To break it, one must awaken. The moment you observe a thought, you step outside its creation. You cease to feed it. Awareness itself is the solvent of astral matter. That is why every mystical school insists on meditation, not as escape, but as surgery. The removal of unconscious energy forms by the scalpel of attention. The true magician is not the one who commands spirits, but the one who refuses to create them carelessly. He knows that every word spoken in anger becomes a shard of energy flying into the world, piercing some unsuspecting aura. He knows that every blessing spoken from the heart becomes a winged messenger of healing. and he knows that his inner world, disciplined, coherent, luminous, shapes the unseen landscape of humanity. Blavatsky's warning, then, is also her gift, that by mastering thought we reclaim our divine inheritance as creators of form. The astral parasites are reminders of what happens when creation proceeds without consciousness. They are the unfinished sculptures of the soul, but consciousness, the steady flame of awareness, is the artist's fire that melts the clay and refines it into gold. In the next chapter, we descend into the mechanics of exchange, how emotion opens portals in the aura, how thought forms attach and feed, and how the simplest act of awareness can reclaim your energy from their grasp. For knowledge, when applied, becomes power, and power, when purified, becomes light. Chapter 4. The Anatomy of Defense. There is a point in every seeker's journey when knowledge must become practice. To know that the invisible world exists is one thing, to walk through it untouched is another. Blavatsky never encouraged fear of the unseen. She taught governance. The same law that allows parasites to feed also allows the awakened to command. In her words, he who knows how to control the forces of his own nature controls the forces of the universe. That is the essence of occult defense, not fighting shadows but mastering light. 1. The aura as armor. Imagine your aura as a sphere of living radiance surrounding the body, pulsating with the rhythm of your thoughts. When you think clearly, it shines. When you love, it expands. When you fear, it contracts and tears. Most people move through life with fragmented fields, leaking energy through anger, anxiety, and resentment. These fractures are the entry points through which astral entities feed. Blavatsky compared the aura to a magnetic shell, similar to Earth's atmosphere. Just as pollution clouds the sky, emotional chaos clouds the aura. Cleansing the field is therefore not a luxury of mystics, but a necessity for all who wish to remain sovereign in consciousness. In ancient Egypt, initiates began each day with a ritual of purification, not as superstition, but as energetic hygiene. They would stand facing the rising sun, breathing deeply, imagining golden light washing through every cell. The purpose was simple, to reset the field before the world could touch it. Blavatsky advised something similar, a daily practice of centering, in which the student recalls his divine origin and reaffirms dominion over thought and emotion. For she insisted that the human being's first duty was to close the doors of the senses to the illusions of the lower world. This does not mean isolation, it means awareness. To walk among storms and remain calm is greater mastery than to hide in a temple. Defense begins the moment you stop resonating with the forces that drain you. 2. The science of vibration. Every emotion, every thought, every word is a frequency. Darkness cannot exist where frequency is high, for its vibration is too slow to endure light. Thus, protection is not resistance, it is elevation. When your heart vibrates in gratitude, love, and serenity, you are literally vibrating beyond the reach of the parasitic spectrum. Your frequency becomes inhospitable to them. You do not need to fight darkness when you dwell in light. It cannot survive the altitude. Blavatsky described this in theosophical language as raising one's plane of consciousness. Modern mystics might call it coherence. It is the same principle by which a hummingbird's wings are invisible. It vibrates too quickly to be caught. The true protection, then, is not walls or rituals. It is rhythm. To maintain inner harmony is to create a frequency field so pure that lower energies cannot anchor to it. When you feel yourself slipping, when fear or anger begins to pull you downward, stop and breathe. 3 conscious breaths, drawn slowly and exhaled fully, reset the vibration of the nervous system. Every breath is an act of sovereignty. In that moment, the body remembers the rhythm of the higher world. 3. The mirror of awareness. Blavatsky often warned her students that obsession with evil forces only feeds them. To fear them is to strengthen them. The more attention you give to darkness, the more life it receives. Awareness, however, is different from fear. Awareness sees without attachment. Fear binds through fascination. Think of awareness as the mirror in which all things are reflected, but nothing can stick. When you observe your own anger, you stop being angry and begin seeing anger. That single shift in identity moves you from participant to witness, from host to master. This is the silent art of defense known in Buddhism as vipassana and in Hermeticism as the watcher at the gate. It is the cultivation of an inner observer who never sleeps. When you learn to stand within that still center, emotions may arise, thoughts may storm, but the aura remains intact, for nothing can pierce awareness. It is the purest vibration in the universe. 4. The fire of transmutation. Yet awareness alone is not always enough. Dense energy must sometimes be transmuted, converted from darkness to light. Blavatsky referred to this as the work of the inner alchemist. The process is simple in concept but demanding in practice. You transform through love. When hatred arises, bless it with understanding. When fear appears, wrap it in compassion. When judgment surfaces, dissolve it with humility. Each act of conscious transmutation releases energy back into the higher current, where it becomes strength instead of weakness. In theosophical symbolism, this alchemical flame is the violet fire, the spiritual light that burns without consuming. It is the divine frequency of forgiveness. To forgive, in the occult sense, is to free trapped energy from its lower orbit. And that too is defense, to leave no residue in the aura upon which shadows can feed. 5. The discipline of silence. There is one more key, often neglected: silence. Speech is vibration made audible. Every word carries energy outward into the astral. Careless speech scatters the forces of the aura like sparks in the wind. That is why initiates of old took vows of silence before receiving higher knowledge. They were not obeying superstition, they were learning conservation. For when speech is measured and purposeful, it builds. When reckless, it leaks. Blavatsky wrote, "The tongue is a two-edged sword. Through it, man blesses or curses himself. Every word of kindness strengthens the light around you. Every word of cruelty tears it open. The power of the logos, the creative word, is still at work in every syllable we utter. To speak consciously is to wield the same force that shaped the stars." 6. The synthesis of the three fires. In occult tradition, the human being is composed of three primary fires: the fire of mind, the fire of heart, and the fire of life. When these burn in harmony, the aura becomes a fortress. When they conflict, the walls fall. The fire of mind must be clear, free from illusion and prejudice. The fire of heart must be pure, steady in compassion, not swayed by passion. The fire of life must be disciplined, its vitality directed upward, not scattered through indulgence. Blavatsky said, "The true initiate is one who can light his inner fires at will and keep them in balance." This is the essence of occult self-defense, coherence between thought, emotion, and act. When the mind thinks truth, the heart feels love, and the body moves in service, the entire being becomes a symphony, and no parasite can dwell within harmony. 7. The radiance of service. Finally, Blavatsky revealed the highest form of protection, service. For when consciousness expands beyond self, no darkness can cling to it. To give light is to be light. Those who live only for themselves create small, stagnant fields easily invaded. Those who radiate goodwill create magnetic suns that dissolve lower forms by their mere presence. This is not moral idealism. It is energetic physics. A self-centered aura curls inward and suffocates. A loving aura expands and purifies. Every act of kindness, every intention to uplift another, releases waves of high-frequency energy that sweep through the astral like cleansing wind. Thus, the compassionate are protected not by rituals but by resonance. 8. The law of return. The final law in the anatomy of defense is simple yet absolute. What you send out returns amplified. If you radiate fear, you draw fearful vibrations. If you radiate strength, you attract allies of light. The universe mirrors your internal state perfectly, without judgment. Therefore, your greatest shield is the continual practice of radiating what you wish to receive. Blavatsky's words echo through time. Man is the maker of his destiny. His thoughts are his tools, his emotions, his material, his spirit, the divine craftsman. To defend yourself from darkness is not to hide. It is to build. To build light within yourself so pure that nothing impure can coexist with it. There is no exorcism greater than peace, no ritual stronger than love, no mantra more protective than silence. When you live in harmony with the divine law, the law of vibration and resonance, every force in the universe aligns to guard you. Your aura becomes not just a shield, but a lamp in the astral night. And when that light is steady, you discover that the war you feared was never between you and them, but between the parts of you that remember the light and the parts that still feed on the dark. To master that war is to end it, and to end it is to awaken. Chapter 5. The Invisible War for Human Energy. There is a war unfolding at every moment, though no banners wave and no guns are fired. It is fought in silence, within thought, within emotion, within the trembling boundaries of the human aura. Its battlefield is not the earth, but the field that surrounds it. And the prize of this war is not territory, but energy. Helena Blavatsky called it the unseen struggle for the vitality of humanity. She wrote that the Earth's astral atmosphere is thick with the emanations of human passion, and that these emanations form the very substance upon which invisible entities feed. This, she said, is why the world oscillates between enlightenment and chaos. Because light and darkness are not metaphors, they are vibrations competing for dominance. The human being, radiant yet forgetful, stands at the center of this tension. Our energy, our life force, our attention, these are the currents that sustain either evolution or decay. Every moment we vibrate with love, clarity, and self-awareness, we empower the higher hierarchy of light. Every moment we descend into hatred, confusion, or despair, we nourish the shadow. This is not mythology. It is the metaphysical economy of consciousness. What we feel, we feed. What we feed, we strengthen. And what we strengthen rules us. Blavatsky described existence as composed of two opposing but complementary currents, the ascending spiral of spiritual evolution and the descending spiral of material absorption. Each soul is a meeting point of these currents, a vortex where cosmic forces converge. The ascending current carries life upward, toward clarity, unity, and divine memory. It manifests as intuition, compassion, creativity, and selflessness. The descending current pulls life downward, toward inertia, division, and forgetfulness. It manifests as greed, fear, lust, and cruelty. In every instant, you are aligning with one current or the other. This is the hidden war, not between nations or ideologies, but between frequencies within consciousness. Every thought that uplifts strengthens the spiral of light. Every emotion that degrades fuels the spiral of shadow. And because humanity's collective aura is the sum of its individual vibrations, the planet itself becomes a mirror of our inner state. Blavatsky often referred to the Earth as a living being, a vast organism with its own aura, mind, and heartbeat. She called it the ensouled globe, wrapped in layers of subtle energy that respond to the psychic emissions of every creature. The Earth's atmosphere, she said, is not only physical, but astral, a membrane that absorbs the vibrations of thought and emotion. When fear dominates humanity, this membrane darkens. When love prevails, it clears. Thus, every soul contributes to the spiritual climate of the world. Wars, revolutions, and collective madness all begin as storms in that invisible atmosphere long before they manifest in history. Today we see this prophecy unfolding with alarming precision. Our technologies amplify emotion on a planetary scale. Billions of minds pulse simultaneously with anxiety, outrage, and desire, creating vast currents of psychic energy. These currents, Blavatsky would say, attract and sustain astral forms of immense magnitude, collective thought entities feeding on humanity's unrest. They are the modern egregores, energetic ecosystems born from our global vibration. You feel their influence in the atmosphere of a city, the mood of a crowd. the sudden despair that sweeps the world for no apparent reason. These are not coincidences. They are symptoms of the invisible war, the push and pull between awakening and amnesia. Yet the war is not hopeless. For every shadow birthed by ignorance, there is a light born of awareness. Each human being, Blavatsky insisted, is a microcosm of the cosmos, capable of channeling the forces of spirit through will and love. The tools of the light are simple yet absolute. Awareness, the sword that cuts illusion. The moment you see the game, you stop playing unconsciously. Harmony, the shield that reflects darkness. Emotional balance renders you invulnerable to psychic contagion. Service, the flame that purifies. To live for others disarms the ego, sealing the aura in altruistic light. Each act of kindness sends ripples through the astral ocean, cleansing not only your own field, but the collective one. Each moment of inner stillness clears a small portion of the planetary smog. If enough souls hold light steadily, the equilibrium shifts. This is how humanity evolves, not through revolution, but through vibration. In her later writings, Blavatsky warned that as human consciousness expanded, the astral world would become increasingly active. She foresaw a time when thought would materialize almost instantly, and when those who lacked mastery over emotion would suffer under the weight of their own creations. She wrote, "When man becomes a god in power but a child in wisdom, the astral plane will overflow its bounds." We are living that prophecy now. Our technologies of attention, our collective imagination, our endless stimulation, these have thinned the veil. The astral tide is rising, and humanity stands ankle-deep in the waters it has conjured. Whether those waters cleanse or drown us depends on consciousness. For Blavatsky, salvation was not escape, but illumination. She believed that humanity's purpose was to bridge matter and spirit, to transform the lower through the radiance of the higher. The parasites, then, are not enemies to be feared, but teachers to be outgrown. They reveal to us every vibration still unmastered, every shadow still unhealed. Their hunger mirrors our forgetfulness. When we remember who we are, they vanish, not because we destroy them, but because we no longer sustain them. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the flow reverses. The energy once leaking outward through fear begins to radiate inward through awareness. The hunter becomes the light. The drained becomes the fountain. When that moment arrives, the war ends. The parasites dissolve back into the substance from which they arose. The aura becomes not a shield, but a sun, radiating in all directions, feeding the world rather than being fed upon. This is the great reversal Blavatsky hinted at, when humanity ceases to be the prey of its own creations and becomes the conscious creator once again. At that point, even the astral parasites serve the divine plan, for they have fulfilled their role as the shadows that sharpen the perception of light. In the end, the war for energy is not won through combat, but through remembrance. To remember is to awaken from the hypnosis of duality, to realize that the same force animates both the angel and the parasite. The difference is direction. One ascends toward unity, the other falls into separation. And so the task of the seeker is not to destroy darkness, but to transmute it, to transform the energy of fear into courage, of hatred into understanding, of pain into compassion. Every such act reclaims power from the lower current and restores it to the higher. This is spiritual alchemy, the great art of turning psychic lead into luminous gold. When you practice this consciously, you become a channel through which the higher energy flows uninterrupted. You cease to oscillate between light and dark, for you have become the still point through which both are reconciled. The war, then, was only ever within you, a mirror of the eternal dance between ignorance and awakening. So, as you walk through the noise of the modern world, through its confusion, its chaos, its feverish hunger, remember this: your attention is sacred currency. Your emotion is food for the unseen, and your awareness is the gatekeeper that decides what is fed and what is starved. Choose carefully what you give energy to, for in every moment you are either nourishing the shadow or fortifying the light. The world you perceive, the destiny you experience, the reality you inhabit, All are reflections of that invisible choice. Blavatsky's final message echoes through the silence. The only protection against darkness is knowledge, and the only victory is light consciously directed. The invisible war ends the moment you remember that no force can drain what you no longer offer. For the awakened soul is not a battlefield. It is the sun itself, untouchable, radiant, and eternal. Chapter 6. Epilogue. The light that cannot be fed upon. Listen carefully. The storm has passed. What remains now is silence, vast, ancient, infinite. Beneath the noise of the world, beneath the whispers of thought, there is a deeper hum, a vibration untouched by shadow. It is the sound of your being before it was divided, before it learned to fear. Blavatsky said that the divine spark within man is a portion of the universal flame. That flame cannot be possessed, drained, or dimmed. It is not born, therefore it cannot die. It is not given, therefore it cannot be taken. You are that spark, the self-luminous presence hidden beneath layers of emotion, memory, and dream. As the echoes of this journey fade, imagine yourself standing within that inner flame. Feel its quiet power, steady, unhurried, eternal. This is the light that parasites cannot feed upon, because it does not bargain. It does not fear. It simply is. The war, you now understand, was never about good and evil in the religious sense. It was about forgetfulness. It was about consciousness abandoning its throne and mistaking itself for the storm. Every time we identified with emotion rather than awareness, we became food for our own creation. We mistook the reflection for the source, and in that confusion, energy leaked. The astral parasites were never invincible. They are sustained by the same law that gives life to galaxies, resonance. They cannot touch what they cannot find within us. Their existence depends upon our vibration, upon what we entertain, indulge, and repeat. To awaken, then, is to starve them, not through battle, but through remembrance. When you remember your origin in the universal flame, you vibrate beyond their reach. Light does not fight darkness, it reveals it, and in that revelation, shadow dissolves back into the light it once was. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the last time you felt drained by a person, a place, a thought. Recall that heaviness that seemed to sink into your chest, that fog behind the eyes, that invisible weight pressing on the soul. Now see that moment from above, as if your higher self were observing it with perfect calm. Notice how the heaviness loses shape the moment you look without fear. That is awareness, and awareness is the great disintegrator. Parasites cannot feed on one who observes them. They thrive only in unconsciousness, in the dark corners of unexamined emotion. The instant you turn the light of observation toward them, they lose substance as mist loses form beneath the sun. This is what Blavatsky meant when she said, "The light of the soul is death to the phantoms of desire." When you witness yourself, you awaken the soul, and the phantoms flee. Now breathe slowly. Imagine that with each inhale, you draw from the source, not from the air but from the radiant core of being itself. With each exhale, release all energy that does not belong to you, all borrowed moods, all inherited fears, all lingering thought forms. See them dissolve into harmless light. Visualize around you a sphere of golden fire, gentle yet impenetrable. It is not a wall, it is a song, a frequency of harmony that nothing discordant can cross. It is the remembrance of your divine coherence. This is not imagination. It is the conscious activation of your field. Every emotion is a vibration, every vibration a boundary. You are choosing the frequency of sovereignty. You are returning to the natural rhythm of the universe. Love without attachment, presence without defense. When you live in this state, protection is no longer a struggle. It is the byproduct of truth. Darkness cannot feed on light that knows itself as light. The sun does not fear the night. It simply shines and the night disappears. So make this your daily practice. Each morning, remember your origin. Each evening, release what is not yours. Each moment, return to awareness. For the greatest spiritual shield is consistency, the steady pulse of consciousness unbroken by reaction. Blavatsky once wrote that the final initiation of the soul is not ascension, but identification with the light itself. When you no longer see yourself as a fragment seeking protection, but as the whole radiating peace, the game ends. The parasites dissolve, the astral storms still, and the battlefield transforms into a mirror, clear, tranquil, reflecting only the infinite. You are not a fragile flame trembling before cosmic winds. You are the fire that gives life to the stars. The entire war was a lesson in remembrance. The darkness did not come to destroy you. It came to teach you how to shine consciously. It came to remind you that even when the world around you is saturated with fear, within you there is an unmoving center untouched by it all. That center is God, manifesting as awareness, the eternal witness, the silent seer. When you abide there, nothing can drain you, for you have ceased to vibrate in the frequency of need. You have become the source. You feed all, yet none feed upon you. That is spiritual sovereignty, not isolation but radiant generosity. And so, if you remember nothing else from this entire teaching, remember this. The light you carry cannot be attacked. Only your belief that you are separate from it can be deceived. When you know yourself as the light, the game of shadow ends. This is not the end, only the opening of a new frontier. For the light that cannot be fed upon must still express itself. And to express, it must pass through a body, a living instrument tuned to the divine vibration. The next journey begins there, the magnetic body, gateway between worlds. It is time to understand how your physical form serves as bridge, how every cell, every heartbeat, every breath translates spirit into matter. There we will explore how the body itself becomes a radiant temple, and how, when it is tuned to the rhythm of the infinite, the light within you no longer merely survives, it creates worlds.